They are Ken Cullings, Robert Bendlin, Dallas Porax, Dennis Dibble, Jeff Pierce, Rick Miner, and Ron Tamburino. Filling out the flight line with them are today's honorees, and we wish you to give them a warm welcome. These are men and women who have given so much. And gentlemen and ladies, if the gentlemen would be kind enough to remove your hats, because now in the period at this point in our ceremony, we look to the color guard and we say our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much, Honor Guard, for all that you've done for us. We greatly appreciate it. All the things that we remember about the Vietnam period. Many times they're negative, but many times they're very, very positive. And the men and women who went over and fought, and many of them died for our country, we salute them. We welcome them home. Our first honoree of this afternoon is Mr. Albert Kammerer, and I should mention that he's the proud father of Fran Davis, who welcomed us just a few moments ago, and we'll present him with his plaque. Mr. Kammerer served with the U.S. Army in Europe during World War II. While waiting to be called to duty with the Merchant Marines, he was drafted. At his induction, he was asked if he preferred the Navy or the Army, to which he answered, the Navy. So his papers were stamped Army. So after training as an infantryman and artilleryman at several bases in the States, he embarked for Norfolk, Virginia, and arrived in Europe during the Battle of the Bulge, a very difficult period. He later served in Naples and Rome, Italy, and was with the 3270th Ordnance Depot Company when he was discharged following VE Day. He expected to be sent to Japan, but the war ended before that occurred. Mr. Kammerer returned to civilian life and worked for many years at Republic Aviation on Long Island, where he helped build many famous United States warplanes, including the P-47 Thunderbolt, the F-84 Thunderjet, the F-105 Thunder Chief, the A-10 Warthog, and as a Marine or a former Marine, I greatly support the Warthog, and even parts for the Space Shuttle. Albert Kammerer, thank you for being you and your long service for our country, both in wartime and civilian life. Thank you, Mr. Kammerer. And before we get to our second honoree, I'd like to introduce the man who will be presenting the rest of today's plaques, Mr. Rodney Phillips. Rod Phillips is a man who himself would make a fine honoree here today. He's a much decorated Vietnam veteran, having received the Purple Heart, Bronze Star, and Air Medal. After his service, he worked in law enforcement for 38 years here in the beautiful state of Florida. Now semi-retired, Rod is president of the Vietnam Veterans American Chapter 1048 and is the chairperson of the Veterans Committee at Halifax Health Hospice. Thank you, Rod, for being with us today. We greatly appreciate your service that remains ongoing. Our second honoree is Bob Balzer. Mr. Balzer enlisted in the U.S. Navy in the year of 1944 at the age of 17. He was one of a group of 10 young men from his Cincinnati neighborhood who enlisted together. He served 2 years during World War II and then another 2.5 years during the Korean conflict. He was assigned, forgive me as I battle the wind here, he was assigned to a fleet tug in the North Atlantic doing rescue and firefighting work during a time when many ships were being sunk at sea. After his service, he returned to high school where he met the woman he later married. On July 3rd, they will celebrate their 65th wedding anniversary. Congratulations to both of the Balzers. In civilian life, Mr. Balzer worked for many years for Sun Oil Company and several other large firms traveling the country. At the age of 60, Bob entered another phase of his life, working for 7 years as a fishing guide in Alaska. Now, at the age of 85, he works tirelessly with the DeLand chapter of Wounded Veterans, or rather warriors, organizing an annual skydiving experience for wounded veterans, many of whom have lost limbs. Bob is also an accomplished parachutist himself, and last year completed his 155th parachute jump. Mr. Balzer, thank you for your service to your country in 2 wars and your continuing work with today's veterans. Our next honoree is Stephen Grimm. Steve joined the U.S. Army in 1965. After basic training at Fort Knox, Kentucky, he went to jump school at Fort Benning, Georgia. Here's the pause. After that, he was assigned to the 7th Special Forces Group at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. When his training was complete, he was deployed to Vietnam. He and his comrades were in the Mekong Delta area in October 1967, just before the start of the Tet Offensive, when their camp was overrun by North Vietnamese troops. Steve was severely wounded and spent 4 months in the hospital. He continued serving his country until retiring from the Army in 1972 with 80% disability. He then spent 34 years as a hospital administrator. Because of his own experiences after being wounded, he spent his civilian career trying to make sure patients received the best in hospital care. Steve is grateful to be here today representing all those who served in Vietnam, glad that they are finally receiving the respect that they were often denied following their service. Stephen Grimm and all of the veterans of Vietnam, thank you for your service and sacrifice on behalf of our country. Forgive me for a moment. Our next honoree is Megan Budvarson. Megan enlisted in the U.S. Navy in 1996 at the tender age of 17. She served as a signal woman and a quartermaster aboard the USS Vela Gulf, a guided missile cruiser. During her service, the ship completed 2 med cruises, visiting the Persian Gulf both times. The crew also participated in the Kosovo campaign. As part of her duties, Megan often worked on the ship's bridge, observing everything out to the horizon, a job she describes as a top of the world sonar check. One of those watches, she spotted a boat loaded with more than 200 Kosovo refugees. The Vela Gulf went to their aid and later enlisted the help of a French ship to take them to safety. In civilian life, Megan works as a social worker for Halifax Health Hospice. She holds bachelor's and master's degrees and is currently working on her doctorate at the University of Central Florida. She's the mother of 2 girls, 8-year-old Madeline and 3-year-old Arabella. Megan Budvarson, thank you for your service to our country. Now, the New Smyrna Beach Balloon and Sky Fest is a family event. So it's only fitting that our next honoree is the other half of the Budvarson family, Megan's husband, Josh. That's right, Josh served aboard the USS Vela Gulf as well, working as a gunner's mate, charged with handling ammunition and explosives as well as maintaining small arms. The big guns and the guided missiles, although Megan and Josh served aboard the same ship, it wasn't until the crew was on shore leave in beautiful Venice, Italy, that they formally met, became better acquainted, and later married, and now are even better acquainted. It was after Megan had left the service that Josh was aboard the Vela Gulf in the vicinity of New York City on 9/11. Within hours, the ship was deployed and underway to the Persian Gulf to participate in Operation Enduring Freedom. Megan learned of his rapid departure on the television news. Josh currently works as a certified occupational therapy assistant for Halcyon Rehab. Josh Budvarson, thank you for your service to our country. We are truly, truly grateful. As we conclude this afternoon's ceremonies, we now ask for silence as 2 buglers play taps in memory of all the veterans who are no longer with us.
A4 will come by. Steve, how many more passes?
Thank you, Robert. How about another hand for the vets?
2 or 3 passes for the A4. Thank you.
And thank you, Halifax Hospital and Halifax Hospital Hospice for presenting that well-deserving award to the vets. Now, making that salute pass in an A4 Skyhawk, A4D Skyhawk, was Larry Elmore, with quite a background himself, went to Vietnam, and Larry has over 1,000, here he comes now for a nice pass,